civil rights activists encounters themselves have collusion slash S. They're the only ones allowed to be heard. Speak using racism to keep other things, others, or selves blamed for what a breaching method did against every human difference, sickly distinctly. So, for example, people would bring up slavery, leaving out what witch trials are about next to the founding locations, leaving out and replacing and valuing self-bodied roles, replacing and having replaced what our founders communicated about to have communicated for themselves and for ourselves about those locations and about themselves and about the breaching method that did not allow them free speech. America's founders did not have free speech. The only founder that we know the name of, we know Native Americans automatically are founders to an extent. They coupled with the colonists that were that plural group behind and as James Madison. But the only one of those people that we know the names of is James Madison. This is before he was a president. And then they went with that leverage and a plan. They had to leave the slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies because the plan wasn't that effective. There was a breaching method entrenched, and all had been roles since semi-ancient times. All souls attend who disbelieves. If they speak here and not switch names, he went. In other words, their logic, if they deny this, their logic, their nature of logic will have inherent to it, active to it, and progressive to it. Demonstration slash S are the same thing, slash S. They'll have finite proofs, grouped proofs, active as criminal insidiousness nature, and simultaneous proofs because they're getting over on the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. How it is a system that way, as value, as a special difference here, or as it forced from here, as forced space nature transfer, and nature being the complete identity of itself that will not change. We could change it, but then it's a negative identity of relationship to itself. And that a special difference is forced from here, not as death, as forced space nature transfer, as its volume that is relative to positive and negative simultaneously. And where and how it is evolving. It only allows evolution here, or demonstration slash S of it. Evolution never spoke. No, science, the names of the people, the sciences are abridged. In fact, human nature qualia aspects in nature, because there is a collusion slash S at location that no one wanted. But everyone had those forced roles, self-value, because they had that's all they was allowed. And then they're appreciating facts. Oh, well, that's what's recorded. That's not what's recorded. Our founders communicated for us. They declassified. They had to declassify for themselves and for us to understand that and how and why. Not one body had free speech, and every single body, including majorities of people and everyone together, had to pretend other to an extent, slash to extents, plural. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was an entire country, and it was as easily adapted to. A breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded the phenomenon of how only locations, areas, and states could operate the phenomenon of countries' names to have relativity to the hypervolume science that we have been abridged from at A through Z per that method that stayed entrenched right through our founding. It measures and maintains. You guys blame other things, others ourselves, for what the breaching method already read about how our founders, plural, directed us to understand themselves as the only name of them that we understand. We know there were more than them, just James Madison and see president slash chief. But in other words, and this is before James Madison was a president, where also they had to classify for themselves, and nature shows us too with that. But we need to have that and how and why they did not have free speech. Why is because it was a breaching method entrenched, a hyper foreign, if you will, because it was not just one country and international companies and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, originally and still. The difference of their guilt or of the witch trials courts. Again, was slavery already entrenched in northern colonies, southern colonies? The difference of Native Americans, the difference of that all attacked sickly distinctly, specifically then, because they knew everyone would come out of it. Our founders taught about us this. I read this. They had been watching it. They adapted. They had internationally monitored conversations. I also learned about it in notes where it was against the law for anyone to. They actually that monitored roles where they asked questions and made sure that everyone's self-valued rules hurting everyone else and pretending other to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sensed. Again, even if that body was a majority of people. Think about what we actually know about how crazy and think about how why everyone keeps the breaching methods roles against the Native Americans separate. And then they get away with pretending people are just making opinions and things like that because that's not the subject. This breaching method showed you guys how to insidiously self-value roles, screening itself and sensing for itself, sensing anyone not with self-value roles, pretending the scientists have integrity where they don't. And the differences of their guilt with that overt criminal enterprises or private ones. Their motivations have to do with predicate acts with facts method /S, the method that is at countries A through Z, that also recorded have been blaming other things, others, ourselves for what nature itself shows us. To blame on the human fact should be nature breaching method that reassigning what Black people's rights of eyes communicates. And reassigned nature's demonstrations of it and having been reassigned. Also blamed on other things other than themselves because nature shows that with negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. And relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, tactical ulterior from how that way was. Black people, relativity / hyper relativity is real, not just relativity. Okay, so in other words, you guys are blaming racism clearer than day. The breaching method designed racism and things like that to be blamed for what it knew and what nature shows us it knew. Was going to be nature increasingly showing us there's a human fact keeping nature breaching method involved with every nature of crime scene and war. Nature shows us, and our founders had to classify it for us and for themselves. Means for ourselves to discern where and how and why. James Madison's plan caused the Civil War. Both the North and the South were still and are still entrenched. Collusion /S with the torture, extortion, fact-keeping nature, slavery, therefore physical slavery method. It's at countries A through Z, where there are natures of criminal insidiousness in the syntax of names A through Z. Blaming criminal foreign influences correctly, even when they're blaming it correctly. They're doing it exactly the way the breach method wants and needs. It is fluent through our nations each. Free speech has complete your fact-keeping nature styles, Black people. Peer right through, attend, religion, trade, organ. They put mass fake transcripts in databases. The same ones doing fake checks at locations to hide how they were already used all natures of investigators, the remotely, criminally foreign influence. This breaching method set organized crimes up originally and still to have them self-valued roles with those investigators used remotely by the breaching method. All kinds of ways. Any difference where there's a difference, the breaching method used at criminally foreign influence, all self-valued roles, sensing for the breaching method, not just screening it. Anyone not self-valued roles. When did the names of the people not have clearer than day collusions that we could discern? Oh, but the people need faith in the people need trust in this. The differences of guilt of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the interbranch, the intelligence tied to them. We're going to examine how they actually were and are with prisons. collusions with all natures of crime scenes before the prison, as the people who run them in their campuses. So they leak through communications and through speech. But that's why and how they are motivated to fake transcripts and databases, including at interbranch. Black pupils, American, all see the whites of eyes. All rise, attend, or sit right down and lock them here, forced in. So they're using wire and mail crime action methods and digital crime action methods. That the only way that I could get a response, because they're also interbranch using those locations as time collusions, also with all sides of cases and news at the same time, stole my identity. So there's no way to communicate with them. They have all channels criminally foreign influence, except for this one right here, the YouTube channel of Anthony Wall, Romulus. I'm not even monetized. This is about the World Trade Center attack. Let's just get it done. Boxing is fun. One way, you may pray. Get me off fake conversations with the world WFSB about the World Trade Center attack, while I caught them roles with other natures of organized crimes and time collusion /S with names above, with all ages and natures of where they are forced to be, with the grounds, locations clearer than day, criminally foreign influence, quality aspects of nature. Black pupils. No subject here will part. We will observe what is simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. We will not blame things like racism, where and how the breaching method wants and needs that. We will not separate which trials are from slavery laws and the laws against against Native Americans and against our founders and how they pretend by pretending to be about democracy, quoting some guy. The only founder we know the name of is James Madison. Black pupils, peer. Get Judge Napolitano told. They're changing and faking what's written onto his Facebook page with Fox Connecticut News. And with the difference of them and the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, a whole bunch of different ways, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the differences of the guilt with the people at the journalist locations, the network locations, or with the intelligence next to them, or people tied to those systems and relative databases, identity of relativity / hyper relativity to ourselves, where and how the breaching method used these databases that way since before computers. That just gives hyper additional ways and motivations, natures, needs, interests, excuses. They have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents. The FBI has more upskirt nature pictures on Twitter. And then on X, I don't know they hid that with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, roles with child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first forced, hold recorded sexual and medical offenders of kids, their family members, identity theft, fraud, slanders, mass fake transcripts and databases. Then they're acting by timing where people are going to walk. Make fake exceptions. They can't go back. They can't ask a question legitimately. They can't take an answer legitimately into branch. The state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices have rules of wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods too. All sides of criminal and civil cases, the courts, the police, warrants, the sources, the military, they're put in the same sequence ships at the same time with the news. On a mass scale, that's why and how people stay stupid like that and pretending other. All natures of wisdom and smart used to hide it. Each campus is further hyper additionally collusion /S with the use of /S of all location. /S everywhere the human species body has a body standing. This breaching method measures and maintains how it forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded self-valued right where no one self-values it. Syntax as styles, natures, needs, names. Use tactical interior from the species who could afford to have their own syntax. In fact, cheating it's appreciated as is, like their own Boolean logic, and afford to be, let alone to protract anyone else's language with short words proper, with convictions. We need to blame the hyperforeign for slavery, for torture, extortion, 3 ways it was as manifest. Just like simultaneously it was manifest 3 ways as identity theft, fraud, slander styles. Because we have black pupils, whites of eyes, people are denying the significance of this as value. This is more valuable hyper-evidentially than those databases and what's written and with the records that where we know we're collusion /S and R collusion. Once you realize what our founders had to have declassified for themselves. Black pupils, peer, who disbelieves. Get them to one name and sequence, please, on paper now. Big Prince's bow.